And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Oh, and don't forget about the Wednesday edition. That's at 9 a.m., again, streaming at richarddugan.com. We put these interviews or these conversations up on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. They call them podcasts. I call them conversations. And we're also on YouTube where you can watch these interviews, and I hope that you will do just that. Subscribe, click the notification so that when I do put up a new interview, a new conversation, you'll be able to listen in and find out what's out there, what's going on, who's helping to try to make this a better place for everybody, like our guest here on the program. We also ask that if you can support us financially, we would be so gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And then we ask you to spend some time going within. You know, it was years ago, I used to think, there's got to be someplace on this planet where I can go and nobody will be able to find me, and I can be secluded and isolated and just be by myself. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. If I can find it, then so can other people. So I realized as I began to, of course, read the great wisdom teachings, if you will, ancient wisdom teachings, I found out there is a place on this planet. And it's within myself. It's within me, as it is within you. Nobody, I'm telling you right, I don't care if you have AI or someone has transferred their consciousness into a computer, they can't get into that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place. So spend some time listening to that still small voice. With all of that being said, it is really a pleasure to have our very special guest here on the program talking about her latest work. Lisa Doggett's my guest, lisadoggett.com, and that's spelled, by the way, Lisa and then Doggett. And again, we will be linked to her website. She is an MD, MPH, family physician, author. Her book is entitled Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me on, Richard. It's really great to be here.
Why is I looked at going up the down escalator. I get as a person, sometimes we feel that way, or as the mythology is, we're trying to push that rock. I believe it was Sisyphus who was trying to push the rock up the hill. And so I can relate to that, and medicine. I can't relate to motherhood. And thankfully, I can't relate to multiple sclerosis. First of all, how do these three items in your title relate to this whole business of up the down staircase? That's a play. Up the down escalator. I knew I was going to do that at least once.
Well, thank you. So Up the Down Escalator refers to my challenges as a physician, a mother, and unfortunately as a patient, to try to keep going and pushing forward despite at many times feeling like everything was against me. And I've realized that wasn't the case, but I certainly have had a lot of challenges along the way, learned a lot from my struggles. And I think I've kind of turned things around so that I'm going up with the escalator now. But at many times I felt like I was trying to fight it.
And we kind of do that, don't we? We instead of, I like to use the analogy. I do like your analogy with the escalator, but I like to use the analogy of a river. And it flows in one direction. And what I suggest to people is, if you're going to go out on that river, which I suggest you do, just allow the currents to carry you, So in other words, go with the flow in your life. And that's kind of what you're talking about here when stuff comes along, because what is it? I'm not going to remember the sayings exactly, paraphrasing here, that it is not the events in your life that define you. It's how you act or in some cases react to those events.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And certainly attitude and response to challenges is very, very important in determining the outcome. I think that it's easier said than done. Many times when you face a challenge, especially if it's really unexpected and seems to throw you off your life path, it can be hard to right yourself. And I certainly faced that when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a disease of the central nervous system. When I was 36 years old. MS is known for causing disability, especially in young adults. It can lead to mobility challenges. A lot of people do end up using assistive devices like wheelchairs. It can lead to a lot of other symptoms like really incapacitating fatigue, visual problems, numbness, mobility challenges I mentioned, but balance as well, bowel and bladder problems, depression, sleep problems. So MS can really cause some significant challenges and does for many people. And that's what I expected was going to happen to me when I was diagnosed at a young age while I was running a clinic for people without insurance and raising 2 kids under 5.
Oh, good heavens. 2 kids, huh? My folks got you beat. They had 6. And at one point, I'm sure all of us were under 10 at one time, all 6 of us.
I cannot imagine.
Oh,
really
my
amazing.
heavens. And the amazing thing, too, is that in spite of all of that, living in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, I'm going to say 12 to 1,300 square foot house, we all survived. We all came out of it unscathed for the most part, and did well. But raising 2 kids, raising 1 kid, I don't even know what that's like because I don't have any kids. But you have written this wonderful book. This is sort of like a memoir of triumph in the face of terrifying diagnoses. And sometimes we get that stuff. And for example, and again, I never thought of these things. I was diagnosed with glaucoma in my left eye many years ago. Eventually, I lost the sight in my left eye. Had a lens implant in my right eye. Thankfully, I am now driving. Then diagnosed with high blood pressure or hypertension, if you will. And then type 2 diabetes. I was like, what the heck? My mother tells me, well, the hypertension's hereditary. I says, what? I don't want it. Give it back to my ancestors. Is this situation that you have been facing for what? What has it been? 10 years?
Almost 14 years.
14 years. Have you done research into it? Or I'm sure you have. Where is it hereditary? Do we even have any clue as to what the source and or cause is?
So that's the $1 million question, and really more than $1 million have been spent trying to figure out some of those answers. The causes of MS are unknown. There are a lot of theories. There's increasing evidence that the Epstein-Barr virus, the virus that causes mono, might be linked to multiple sclerosis. It's looking pretty likely that there is a connection there, but it's not a genetic condition. It's not inherited in a kind of blue eyes, brown eyes sort of fashion. Having MS in the family does increase the risk for others. First degree relatives have about a 1 in 25 chance of getting MS. Like my kids have about a 4% chance of getting MS. But odds are really good they won't get it. I have no family history before me of MS, at least nothing that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of came out of the blue.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of a conversation I had with my father years ago where we were all sitting around the dinner table and I made the comment about how, I choose not to have children. I have been neutered. And because I didn't want to pass on the hereditary visual problems to future generations. To which my father responded, Richard, you do know that if I had made that decision, you wouldn't be here. And I said, yeah, I know. I understand that. And I appreciate the fact that you brought me into this world. But this diagnosis, and if I may ask, how old are your kids?
My kids now are 15 and 18.
Okay, so you were not diagnosed until what? If I'm doing my
They
math right, they
they
were
were little.
born.
They were 2 and 4 at the time of my diagnosis.
Right. So you got your diagnosis after you had your kids.
That's right.
Do you think that you would have made a different decision? I mean, granted, the percentage is low. You just said, 4%. That's a small percentage, but it's still there. Would you have possibly made a different decision? And this kind of dovetails into the broader question of decisions about your life, your future, your career, your relationship with your husband, who, by the way, if I'm correct, is a pediatric doctor.
That's right. Yes. Well, I think it's really a difficult decision for people to make, if they just want to have kids after they're diagnosed with a chronic condition. For me, fortunately, I didn't have to make that decision. With MS, I think for me, the issue was less worried about passing it on to my children and more about would I be able to care for them? Would I be physically capable of driving them around and chasing them around the house when they were little? And fortunately, I've been able to do those things, but I think that would have been my bigger question. Fortunately, with MS, treatments have improved significantly over the last 2 decades, 3 decades, and especially over the last 5 or 6, 7 years, so that we now have treatments that can almost halt the disease in a lot of us. Again, it can still be very devastating for a number of people, but for many people, the condition is very treatable. And women do fine with pregnancy in many cases and have successful outcomes. Kids are normal. Kids don't usually get MS. So I think it probably would have been a reasonable choice for me to have kids after my diagnosis, but I am kind of glad I didn't have to make that choice.
Oh, yeah, nobody really wants to. And I now can see the connection between medicine, motherhood, and multiple sclerosis. Up the Down Escalators, the title of the book, Lisa Doggett and lisadoggett.com. Lisa Doggett's my guest, and you are listening, my friends, to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and this is a pleasure to talk with Lisa Doggett, who has written this wonderful book called Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. Let's get into an area now where I like to define terms. I know what multiple is, and you've got sclerosis, which leads me to believe that there's a multiplicity of different kinds of sclerosis. What is sclerosis, for starters?
So sclerosis is scarring, and it refers to the damage that occurs to myelin. Myelin is the coating of nerve cells that acts as a sort of insulation. When myelin is damaged, the central nervous system can't communicate with the rest of the body as well. You sort of think about it as if your insulation around a wire was gone. It just doesn't work as well, and so that's why it can lead to these various manifestations I mentioned.
Is aside from medicine and possibly therapy, and I haven't talked with my sister about this, and she also has multiple sclerosis. Is technology moving in a direction, aside from medicine, medical technology certainly, that is providing, I don't know, not so much prosthetics, because you still have all your limbs, but ways in which they can help you to maybe rewrite they say you can rewrite the neural pathways in the brain. I don't know that you can do that with nerves in terms of redirect, like electric companies can redirect power when there's a problem in a particular sector, a particular area. Is there any technology that's doing anything like that? Or is this something that once you have it, it kind of affects all the nerves?
Well, it doesn't affect all parts of the body equally at the same time. There are episodes where certain parts of the central nervous system are damaged. Fortunately, it's not the entirety at the same time. And there are different kinds of MS. So some people like me have relapsing and remitting MS. In fact, that's about 85% of people, where you have periods where a certain part of your brain or spinal cord is damaged, but then you get better. And then there's about 15% of people that have a more progressive form of the disease. And that is where you don't have these periods of remission and you tend to accumulate disability over time.
I know that for myself, and I don't, well, let me back that question up. What are some of the early symptoms, if you will, that And again, I don't want people to become hypochondriacs necessarily, but what about some of the early symptoms that would trigger, you know what, I better go see a doctor?
That is a really good question. And it's a tough question to answer because MS can have so many different symptoms. So it's very difficult to diagnose. And many people go months, even years without getting a firm diagnosis, especially because, as I mentioned, there's remitting MS so that they may have a relapsing or, worsening of symptoms, but then they get better and they think, oh, I don't need to do anything about it. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of people are missing out on treatment because if we start treatment early and we recognize MS early, the risk of progressing to a more disabling form of MS is much less with treatment. But I think that those early symptoms are things like visual changes. There's a condition called optic neuritis, which can lead to really serious visual problems. That's commonly seen in people with MS, and that's a frequent presentation for people when they're first diagnosed. Other symptoms include really unexplained numbness or weakness in legs, arms, other parts of the body. Other visual problems can occur as well. I had double vision, which was really bizarre. Didn't have an explanation for that. And I think that when you have kind of unusual neurologic symptoms without another explanation, it's important to see a doctor and really press for a diagnosis. It can sometimes be very hard to figure out. I worry, I could have missed MS in patients that I saw because it's just something that presents in so many different ways, and it's often not on our radar. My original symptom was dizziness, and dizziness can be caused by a dozen or more things. And so that's not something that's very specific for MS, even though that was really that and continues to be my main symptom.
Mm. What's the history of multiple sclerosis? Does it go back to the beginning of man, or is there a period of time in that maybe it was after the Industrial Revolution, and maybe, who knows, there's a connection there?
I don't know enough about the history. I know it's been around for at least, many hundreds of years. We've known about it for over 100 years. It was first described, I believe, in the 1800s, but I don't know enough about the history.
Okay. And what about, certainly we could talk about your doctors. I'm sure they're doing a fabulous job in terms of treating you. And I'm sure that there is research ongoing. I'm not sure how well it's funded. I hope it's funded well. I wish that we didn't have to categorize. There aren't enough people with this problem for us to even research it yet. When it reaches
Right.
1 million, that's when we'll start to search. And it's sad. And the same thing with medications. Pharmaceutical industry is not going to, if you're the only one with it, they're not going to research a medication to help you because it's not in their profit. It's not in their profit loss benefit kind of thing. But let's talk, getting away from all of that. How about the support system, the support team? Certainly initially, in addition to yourself, because you sound like you're a very optimistic individual, and you've got a lot that you still want to accomplish. You've got your husband who is there to support you as well. And I'm sure as your kids have grown, they have also been there to support you. How about outside the family itself?
I'm so glad you asked because, Richard, I think having a strong support circle is really one of the most important things that anyone with a chronic condition can do. And I've been very fortunate to have that. I do have my husband and my kids, and they are very helpful, but I also have a strong support system with a lot of friends and family nearby. I think that, in the early days after my diagnosis, I can't imagine how I would have even gone through each day without them. I was struggling so much, just from a psychological standpoint, in addition to physically dealing with dizziness. At one point, I was bedbound because I had a spinal tap and got really sick afterwards, and was very, very debilitated. So having that support circle, friends were bringing meals, taking my kids for play dates. My husband was still working, but he was able to get some support from his colleagues so that he was able to be more available to me. My parents live nearby. My sister lives across town. They have been incredibly helpful. And that support circle is so vital. I saw that with many of my patients when they lacked a support circle. It was very, very difficult for them to get the care they needed and for them to do well.
Mm. Well, I know that my sister and anybody who's got some kind of debilitating condition, um, they surround themselves. I mean, we've got a pretty good sized family. In addition to, I'm sure the what do they call it? Oh, it's not rehab. It's a physical education, physical
Physical therapy?
therapy. Thank you very much. I'm going to have you as my thesaurus here. I've got something else going on. It has nothing to do with what you're dealing with, but um, and I find it very interesting how some people will surround themselves. Other people will move as far away from others, either be out of shame or even pride. I don't take charity, kind of thing. Do you run into folks like that in your practice and who are dealing with this and other conditions who, yeah, that's a diagnosis. That's fine. And all. Okay. See ya. Here's your, here, I'll pay the bill and I'm out of here because I don't need anybody's help. When in fact, they would do so much better if they opened their hearts, their minds, their awareness, and so forth, and began to receive the support that they so richly deserve.
Absolutely. I think we tend to, our society tends to make us think that we need to be very strong, and it's not strong to reach out for help and to seek help. And I kind of felt some of that when I was first diagnosed. I think I was like, no, I can do this. I don't need any help. I'm fine on my own. But I learned really fast that I did need to seek help from others. I've had patients though that don't have that support circle, or who feel really strongly that they need to try to do it all themselves. And I think that's a real challenge. Everybody has different situations though. Everyone has different upbringings that may value self independence more than others who are taught that it's okay to ask for help. And other people are in situations where they can't reveal their diagnosis. So with MS and with many other conditions, there can be a stigma attached to that. I see that especially in patients with mental health problems, unfortunately, where they're depressed or they have physical PTSD, for example, and they can't share that with other people because they're concerned about losing a job, losing a friend, their family not supporting them. That's incredibly unfortunate. And I encourage those patients to find at least someone that they can confide in, to have someone that can support them and be a part of, kind of share that burden. It's really important to have support.
Lisa Doggett's my guest. LisaDoggett.com is her website, and the book is entitled, ladies and gentlemen, it is entitled Up the Down Escalator: Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. And you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on the program, as we bring you new paradigms for a new world and choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I don't know how, I guess I'm going to find out here in a moment, how in touch with your inner life, your inner world, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program about encouraging people to go within to listen to that still small voice. And case in point, I was talking with a guest, and he had a majority of his stomach removed due to stomach cancer, and we got to talking about all of these different things, and we got into an area that I'm curious about with you, if you've even pondered this at all. I asked him, I says, do you know why you had stomach cancer? And I'm talking on a more metaphysical or spiritual level, because there are those who will say that certain conditions represent certain aspects that are causing the disease. It's not to say that if you've resolved that particular trauma or conflict that the disease goes away, but at least you now understand, oh. And he was sharing about his upbringing and how his parents made him feel as he would sit at the dinner table and eat. And, and he gave his example. Have you looked at that at all from a more, as I say, metaphysical perspective, the symbolism of multiple sclerosis, and what that means? Why do you have multiple sclerosis?
So that's certainly a question I think many of us ask when we're diagnosed with an unexpected chronic condition. I call MS my life sentence with MS. I'm stuck with this forever. And I've definitely asked why me early on, and continue sometimes to go, why did I get this? I don't understand. I was healthy. I was a health nut. I was exercising and eating well and doing everything that I told my patients to do. So I didn't understand why I got sick. And I have to say, I still don't understand why me, but I also think that I've learned a lot from this condition. And I try to, maybe that's the reason that I needed to gain this wisdom. I needed to be able to share this with my book and come out and help other people be vulnerable, to seek that support circle, to be comfortable in their own skin, and understanding that, just because they have a chronic condition doesn't mean that their life is any less important, and that they can't be active and lead, reach their goals and be successful.
I was married for 15 years to a blind woman, and we have since gone our separate ways. But she was always angry because the rest of the world wouldn't conform to her way of life. And it's like, I kept trying to tell her, I said, it doesn't work that way. We as human beings, we adapt, we adjust. I never even thought anything of my low vision in my left eye and 2200 vision in my right eye as a kid growing up. I wore the thick glasses. I bicycled everywhere in Phoenix. It wasn't even a question of thinking about it. I didn't think about it. I just did it. I'll show them. I will bicycle everywhere and risk my life and so forth. And no, it was just what I did. So now here you are, and you're dealing with this, and yet you continue to practice, don't you? And you continue to, I'm sure, you continue your education, even if it might be informal. It may not be in a classroom, or I don't know, maybe you do take refresher courses and so forth. But you haven't let this stop you in any way, shape, or form.
I appreciate your sharing your story. I think you were resilient, maybe even without knowing it, or even being able to call it that, but you clearly didn't let it get you down. And I've tried to make sure that MS doesn't stop me. In fact, in some ways, I think it's helped me to do more. I've really taken on a lot of physical challenges. I bike the MS 150, which is a bike ride from Austin to College Station, Texas. It's over 160 miles. And over 2 days. And I do that as part of the National MS Society's fundraising effort every spring. I've taken on a triathlon. I did a half Ironman triathlon this spring in April. And I've really also embraced, as you said, some other career challenges. So right now I'm studying to be board certified in lifestyle medicine, in addition to family medicine. I'm already board certified in family medicine, but this is a way for me to learn more about all of the healthy habits we can take on to improve our overall health, reduce chronic disease, because I say one chronic condition is more than enough. And I really want to try to keep from getting anything else, and take good care of myself as well as my patients.
When my wife was my present wife was diagnosed in 2001 with a rare form of fallopian tube cancer. She was going through the chemo. She overheard some people in the room where she was having the chemo administered. They said, well, if you have like 2 or 3 successive marker tests that are right in the range you're supposed to be normal, then you can stop your chemo. So she goes to the doctor, her oncologist, and she asks him about that. And he says, well, I'm not sure what they were referring to, but here's the thing. If you were to stop chemo now, regardless of what your markers are, there's a 70% chance that you'll have a recurrence. It'll come back. And the first thing that went through my mind, this deals with this lifestyle medicine that you're talking about. The first thing that went through my mind was, okay, this is a rare form. I was like, at that time, it was only 1,200 women at that point had this. And I had a friend of mine that I worked with whose mother had it. And I thought she was dead. So I said, how long did she live? She said, oh, she's still alive. It's been 9 years, he says. And this was back in 2001. So my first question to the oncologist, or I didn't actually put this to him, but it's in my mind. Okay, I want all the records of the 100% of the people who came down with this, and I want to compare the 70% who didn't survive. They succumbed to that cancer, and then the lifestyles of the 30%. What did they eat? What did they drink? Where did they live? How did they live? What kind of work did they do? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because the thing that really galls me about medicine that does seem to be changing, and I'm sure you're going to be part of this change, is we're all individuals. And I realize that for blood pressure, for example, normal is, what is it? 120 over 80?
Yes, less than 120 over 80.
But we're all different. And I even told that to my doctor when he says you have high blood pressure. And of course, mine was like, I think my high was 182 over 110 or something like that, which immediately my wife says I was in the stroke zone. And I'm going, oh, really? I've never been here before. It's fine now, but we're individuals, and and we move around. I mean, I'm originally from Phoenix. I live in Santa Barbara. I don't know about you. You're in Austin now?
That's right. Yes.
I don't know if you started out there or not, but they're finding environmental causes to a lot of things that people are suffering through. And the list goes on. So I find that fascinating. That whole study, that's relatively new, isn't it?
There's been a real increasing understanding of both environmental impacts on health of, everything around us, as well as what are called the social determinants of health. And environment is a component of that, but the social determinants of health include, our resources, our neighborhoods, the environment in which we live, work, play, go to school. Those social determinants of health are often impacted a lot by income, and even ethnic and racial disparities can play into that. But we know social determinants of health impact about 80 to 90% of our health outcomes, compared to only 10 to 20%, which is affected by our healthcare that's provided by a doctor. So really, our social determinants, our environment is even more important than the medical care we receive.
Mm. Well, I know that I've kind of, and maybe it's a guy thing, not really been thrilled with going to the doctor, because it's like taking your car to the mechanic. Okay, I have this problem. I hear this squeak in the back. And the next thing you know, you've got a bill that's the size of Montana, of things that you didn't ask about. I just wanted that checked in the back of the car. And now you're telling me I've got a bad alternator. My transmission needs to be rebuilt. I need a new head gasket. The tires need to be changed. And the list goes on. And it's like, medicine is like that sometimes too. You go in for one thing and then they run a battery of tests. But by the same token, I'm wondering if technology is getting to the point where, kind of like Star Trek, some of that stuff with the medical area, where you lay down on the table and it just does a complete scan. It does all of the tests. I mean, do you know that I don't even know what my blood type is? And yet I've had blood drawn like you wouldn't believe. But I understand that's a separate test that you have to ask for. And I'm going, really? Okay. Maybe it's in I'll have to find my baby book that my mother gave me. Maybe it lists it in there. I don't know. That's a frustration for a lot of people. And I'm wondering, did they stay focused? Because you said before, some of the symptoms you were experiencing, like the dizziness, could be explained by a lot of, maybe you're anemic, maybe you're not eating you're not eating enough nourishing
absolutely.
foods. Maybe you've got a gas leak in the house, maybe a carbon dioxide, or again, any number of things. Do you think that our technology, from the environmental standpoint, and I'm not talking environmentalism here, I'm talking about, where we live and work and play. Do you think that in this study that you're in about lifestyle medicine is going to reveal an awful lot about, I don't know about you, but I grew up as a kid eating dirt. I mean, I'm not actively per se, but we'd get dirt in our mouths when we were digging holes, when we're digging tunnels for our army buddies and our Tonka toys and stuff. We played in the grass. We rolled around and got itchy and all those things. And aside from the things I've mentioned already, I'm feeling great. I'm 17. Of course, the body is 63, but that's another story.
So I think that our technology is helping us better understand so much of ourselves. We've mapped the human genome. We're understanding medical knowledge is just growing by leaps and bounds on a daily basis. In fact, it's impossible to keep up as a doctor. But I think lifestyle medicine is incredibly important. We know it's connected with a variety of chronic conditions, including two that you mentioned, hypertension and diabetes. Those are very much impacted by lifestyle choices. And there's a whole field of medicine that's growing to understand how we can help people to make better choices that also fit with their own lifestyle and their own values, so that we're not imposing restrictions and values on people, but helping them understand what they want and then to achieve that. That's really what lifestyle medicine is about, and hopefully avoiding medications in many cases to control conditions and prevent conditions, again, through those healthy choices. Oh, I lost your sound.
There we go. Click that button, and we're talking with Lisa Doggett, and lisadoggett.com, the website. Will be linked to it as well. And the book entitled Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. And you, my friends, are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and Lisa Doggett is my guest, and we are in the weeds, so to speak, or maybe even further than that, because it's something that needs to be discussed. I mean, yes, obviously your book dealing with medicine, motherhood, and multiple sclerosis, but we're broadening it out considerably. As I said before, I grew up in the 60s and as a kid, single digits. And I mean, I think back on those times, especially since the passing of my father and my eldest sister, and think about those times back there on, and I can speak to this now. I was living in Phoenix on what was called Hubble Street. I don't know why, but I loved that name. Hubbell. It was just so easy to spell and all of that good stuff. And it was a great little street. It was one of those streets that went dotted line across the city, because, it would start here and end. And we had T sections at each end of the street. So we could play in our street because we lived sort of in the middle. And if cars turned, they had to turn. So as soon as, hey, car, everybody out of the street. And we'd get out of the street. They'd go by. We'd get back out in the street and play. To my father's consternation, we'd dig a bunch of holes in his backyard to play. My brother and I built these wooden forts that were anything but up the code, let me tell you. They were rickety and dangerous. I stepped on more nails than I can think of. I'm pretty sure I had maybe one or two tetanus shots at the time. And look at me today. Yes, hypertension. Mother says it's hereditary. It's in the genes. Okay, I'll accept that. High blood sugar. What? I don't know if that's hereditary or not. I'm still working on trying to get that under control again. It's like I've had it and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, following my father's passing this year, my sister's last year, my blood sugar, for some reason, I cannot get it down. Everything I do, I take the medication. I'm trying something new that's more natural, cinnamon. And I'm trying that every day to see if that will help. But vision, I'm driving. And that vision is still stable from, as far as I can tell, the day that I had that lens implant. But other than that, I don't think I could run a marathon. I could run a short one, maybe 26 feet. Do you find that a lot of your patients, they struggle, I'm sure, as they get older with the frustration of not being able to do, and sometimes they'll do some of these things and actually they can do more harm to themselves?
Sure. I think we have to recognize our limits as we age. I know I just turned 50. I understand it. I feel it. It's not as easy to do a lot of the things I used to do. And that's a normal part of aging. And I think we have to push ourselves to keep being as active as we can be, and certainly to continue to be as healthy with our choices as we can be. But we also have to recognize our limitations, because as you said, if you push yourself beyond those limits, you can do more harm than good and end up having to get surgery or end up with an injury.
Yeah. I wonder if somewhere down the road, and again, I'm in my early 60s. I don't know if in my 70s or 80s I'll need to have uh, uh, maybe a new knee put in or something, because when I was a kid growing up, I was bicycling everywhere. That's rough on the knees regardless, because it's a constant hinge movement that's over and over and over again. Um, I don't know about the hips. I mean, I hear stories of friends of mine who are my age or older, and they go through these procedures. Some of them great success. In other words, oh my God, I have to go back again because it hurts so much, and they got to fix this and that and the other, or they use the wrong material, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, it's certainly what was it I heard not long ago, that um, elderly life is not for the weak, something along those lines. That you have to be very courageous to be willing to go through old age. So I suppose we all are in that. You're not even close to that yet. I'm fast approaching. My father lived to be almost 92 years old, and
Wow.
quite honestly, and I'm certain that the reason that he went was because he just couldn't stand the fact that he had lost his eldest daughter. So he chose, and they diagnosed this the Saturday before his passing. I don't know why they hadn't diagnosed it before. Parkinson's and onset dementia. And he only lived 5 days more after the diagnosis.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, I get it. He really didn't want to be here. Do you find that there are people who get to that point? And did you ever get to that point? I know you said you had your moments where you just don't want to be here anymore because this is too hard.
I think it's normal for many of us at times to just say, gosh, why? Why do I have to keep doing all of this? Why am I here? And I think that we have to respect that feeling at times, and yet, we have to also keep in mind all of the reasons that we are here, and the people that depend on us, and that we all have a purpose, and try to find what that purpose is, and keep moving forward. For me, it's always been important to have some kind of a goal. So, for people that are just struggling with why am I here, I think that's a really important question to try to answer. I do think everyone has a purpose, and everyone can find that, but sometimes it does take a lot of introspective searching.
Well, I know I've been doing a lot of that lately, not because of my conditions, but because of relatives leaving the planet,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
as much with my eldest sister, more so with my father. And
It's hard.
it's well, what's interesting is that he's happy and he's out of that body. He couldn't see well, he couldn't hear well. He wore to his dying day, he wore those thick glasses, Coke bottle bottom glasses, wore two hearing aids, and had trouble with his stability. And so my mother says, well, she told him, she says, on the other side, you'll see perfectly and you'll hear perfectly. When she was sharing this with me, I said, and he'll be able to walk without falling down. And she chuckled at that. So, as they say, well, he's in a better place. Well, better, worse, it's all relative, but I know that at least he's happy that he's free from that body, and he is now with the one that we refer to as our eldest sister. And I think that that's I wonder, is that part of this whole process too? I'm going to go back to that lifestyle and dealing with our mortality. That
I
can weigh on us too, can't it?
It absolutely can. And I think to variable degrees, some people are struggling with losing others, and some people are dealing with their own mortality, which when you are diagnosed with a chronic condition, I think you have to face that a little more directly. And we also face a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty is a really big part of what I had to deal with MS, is because it's so variable in terms of its course. And we all live with a great deal of uncertainty, but when you have a chronic condition, it increases that uncertainty, and makes us really have to take head on some of those challenges, like our purpose and our mortality, and how long we're going to be able to keep doing the things that we find meaningful.
Hmm. Finding meaning in one's life, and Another phrase that I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, I'm sure that you've dealt with this. Things are pronounced differently in different parts of the world in English. I love the British who, I need to go to the laboratory to test this. Da, da, da. I'm going to the laboratory. Aluminium, and we say aluminum. But a lot of folks around the world, they're not looking at disease. They're looking at dis-ease. Have you looked at these kinds of conditions from that standpoint of, okay, what are you uneasy about? What is your
Sure.
dis-ease?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to understand kind of just that's part of kind of the lifestyle medicine approach, is really trying to understand what's driving someone and what is really what is causing anxiety, what's causing them to lose sleep, and then also what's helping motivate them to get up that next day, even though they're in pain or even though they're feeling worried about something, or feeling really down, they're still getting up and putting one foot in front of the other. So I think that trying to understand, and disease is not just the kind of the behind the scenes pathophysiology of what's happening in your body, but a lot of it is a mental state. And that's what kind of that dis-ease is referring to. If we can get a handle on what's happening with us mentally, and really try to impact that for the better, it can really impact our overall physical health too.
There was I want to say psychologist, maybe it's more of a philosopher, but he was diagnosed at one point. This is years and years ago. He's written a number of books, I'm sure, and has since passed. But he was in the hospital diagnosed with whatever it was and given, I think, like 6 weeks to live. And he said no. So in his hospital room or at his home, he started watching like the Three Stooges and so forth. And he went on to live, I don't know, maybe another 20, 30 years because he said no. Which is also what I said to my primary care physician about my blood sugar when he told me, Richard, this is going to be a long road. I said, no, it's not. I know how I got here. It was the pandemic. What did everybody turn to in way of foods during the pandemic? Comfort foods, sugars and carbs. Do you know that my A1C was at 11.2?
Wow.
Yeah, an average of 275 blood sugar level. And in a month and a half, I brought it down to normal, 5.7 and between 110 and 130.
Great.
Now,
that's a big improvement.
And now I got to figure out, okay, what in the Sam Hill has happened in the last 5 months, 6 months that will not allow me to bring it down where I want it. But that is a mindset. Do you delve into that at all? I know you're an MD. You're not a psychologist per se, but do you talk to your patients at all from that perspective, saying, look, your attitude is everything. How you perceive what we are discussing here is going to make a big difference in how you deal with it, the treatment, and so forth. Even though, as you've already stated, there's no reversal or cure, if you will, for multiple sclerosis.
So I think that attitude is very important. It's important to convey that to patients, but it's also, I try not to kind of dictate for them what they need to do. So I wouldn't say, you've got to change your attitude. I would really kind of try to talk with them about what's driving them, what their concerns are, what their hopes are and their dreams, and what's most important to them. What are the most important things in their lives? And then kind of through a process of back and forth, try to help them understand what they need to do to get to where they want to be. So it really needs to come from that individual. It can't come from the doctor. That person has to be able to understand for themselves what's going to help, what's going to make a difference to get them to reach their goals.
At the same time, they've got to decide what their goals are, which I know is not part of your job, but I'm sure you might phrase it that way, that, you need to kind of focus on, what do you want to achieve? What are your goals here? For me, like, for example, with the type 2 diabetes, I want to get my blood sugar down to normal. He would ask me that several times during the process. I said, I just want to get my blood sugar as well as my blood pressure down to normal rate. That's all I want. as far as the
Right.
medical aspect. Do some folks have trouble figuring out what their goals, trying to figure out what their goals are?
Absolutely. I think that can be really tricky. As you know, as sometimes people are so wrapped up in taking care of the day to day. A lot of my patients struggled with really significant challenges, even just paying rent, with getting jobs, with taking care of parents, ailing parents or spouses or children, and couldn't even think about kind of those more long term goals that that you and I have the luxury of thinking about. And so I think really helping to address some of those day-to-day challenges was important for me as a physician, but also, when we do have the moment to really go deeper, I do try to probe and say, what was the happiest time in your life? What made that the happiest time in your life? What did you used to want to do when you were growing up? What were you looking forward to about being an adult? And try to kind of dig into what were some of their motivations earlier on that they may have lost sight of, and when all of these other things came up and kind of clouded their vision of what they wanted for their future. And then we can go back and try to understand, maybe we can recreate some of those. Sometimes it's just like a matter of finding connection. We talked about support circles, but connection with other people. That's one of the tenets of lifestyle medicine, is really forging, supporting connections with others. And I think that sometimes helping people understand that being connected with others actually reduces your risk of chronic conditions, improves your life expectancy. And so if you can, if you've lost a friend that you or lost touch with a friend that you were close to, or have estranged family members that, you may want to reconnect with them. And that can actually, if you can improve those connections, that can really help your health long term.
Talk to me about the impact, the influence, the effect of pets in our lives in this regard.
It's funny you ask that, because right at my feet, I have my dog sleeping next to me. Pets are wonderful. I've always had pets. Growing up, we had a whole bunch of them. I don't have as many now, because I don't go to pet stores as much, as little as I can. We have to get our dog food, obviously, but I really have had only rescue animals as an adult. But I really love having animals in my life, and my dog has been a big challenge at times. She's a rescue animal who loves to escape the yard, but she's great, and she's a lot of good energy. I think that having an animal in your life can be really powerful.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've had, even though I didn't grow up, for example, most kids have dogs or cats, and my father was not really big into animals in the household. And I'm not I never really did. I should have asked him, but I didn't. Why? But as I got older, I got married the first time. My wife came home from San Rafael with a guide dog. And not too long after that, we got a cat and then a second one. And it was really kind of cool. I will say that when I saw her coming down the gangplank with the dog, I'm going, I'm not getting close to that dog at all, because I know in about 7 to 10 years, I know what's going to happen, and I don't want to deal with that drama. Well, that didn't work. You know for sure that did not work. With my present wife, at one point we had over 40 chickens, 40 hens. We had 3 dogs and 9 cats here in Santa Barbara.
Oh my gosh.
And over the 17 years that we have lived here in Santa Barbara, we now have 7 chickens, none of which are the originals. We're down to 3 cats and 1 dog. So I've been dealing with, of course, that whole issue of the loss of the loss of animals, and how close everyone how close you get to animals. But it's worth it. It really is.
It is worth it. I have a chapter in my book talking about the loss of my last dog, which was really hard, and actually came amidst seeing patient. I was having seeing a patient who was struggling tremendously. At the same time, my husband was at the vet with our dog who was dying, and it was heartbreaking. But something that I definitely pushed myself to get through. And you get through it, and you never feel quite the same. You always have a hole in your heart after losing an animal that you're close to, but you do have forged new connections. And we've certainly had that with our newer dog.
Well, those pathways are so important. I had a dog named Makushla. She was a beautiful, all white with a pink nose. And I believe she was a shepherd, a husky mix. And she turned into a dog that I always wanted. And that is, normally we would keep her fenced in. We'd go in the backyard and play and blah, blah, blah. But in the last few years of her life, I would let her out in the front, no fence. She might go wandering off, but if I called her, boom, she came right back. Or she would follow me when I walked around. And I always wanted a dog like that. And that was so cool. When you have an animal that is that bonded to you. And I've been told by some intuitives that she is still bonded to me on the other side, and she is looking out for me over my right shoulder.
Oh, I love that.
And I'll take that. I will indeed. We're talking with Lisa Doggett. LisaDoggett.com is the website. And once again, that book title happens to be Up the Down Escalator, Medicine, Motherhood, and Multiple Sclerosis. And you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan here with Lisa Doggett. And Lisa, I want to thank you for giving us so much time here on the program. I really appreciate your sharing your story, this extraordinary story that people, they need to hear, but they also need to, I want to say they will also need to live what you're talking about, regardless of what their condition is. And we all have conditions. It might be physical, mental, or emotional, but it also might be where you live. Maybe it was where you work and it's not a great place to work. I wish I could find another place kind of thing. Maybe it's, I don't know what my life's purpose is. I don't know what my goals are, and so on and so forth. And that's a condition too, searching for. And so I would encourage people to pick up a copy of your book. And again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been great getting to talk to you.
I have 3 final questions that I ask all of my guests that I will ask you. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We podcast these programs, believe it or not, at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many others. I go fast because there are so many. We're also on YouTube, where you can listen to and watch these interviews, get to know our guest in a little bit more in person, if you will. We ask that you, if not subscribe, click notification so that the next time I post another conversation, you'll be notified and you can listen to said conversation. And what else is there? We stream live, of course, with those broadcasts at richarddugan.com. We also ask that if you can support the work we're doing financially, we would be so gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And we also ask you to spend time going within and listening to that still small voice for guidance. And maybe through that guidance, you'll find the goals you're looking for, the purpose that you've been searching for. And let us know. I'd love to receive an email from you. Richard@richarddugan.com is the email address, and we'll respond to it. And thank you so much for being a part of Tell Me Your Story. And with all of that, we go to our final 3 questions for our guest. And the first of those 3 is, who is Lisa Doggett?
Well, that's a hard one to sum up quickly, but I am a deeply passionate person committed to helping people who are most vulnerable to live their best lives. I'm also a mom. I'm a healer as a doctor. I'm a wife. I'm a friend. I'm a daughter. And I really care about making the world a better place and have spent my life trying to do that.
What is your life's purpose?
Again, I think that's a hard thing to sum up quickly, but I would say that I am here to try to help others to lead their best lives, and to connect with others in a meaningful way, to try to make a difference again.
And finally, what was your best day?
There have been a lot of good days. I think one best day was when I was married to my husband, Don. We had been together for nearly 10 years, and it was a very joyful occasion. We were married right after 9/11, when a lot of us were struggling with what our country had just gone through. And it was later that same month we brought together friends and family from around the country and celebrated our relationship with all the people we loved best. And it was really a joyful occasion. So that would be one of my best days for sure.
Well, once again, Lisa, thank you so much for giving us so much time. And we look forward to connecting with you down the road to see how things are going and what new things you've discovered in the new studies that you're into.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's been great talking with you.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy. Doug, I'll see you down the road, my friend.